What must be the
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our weekly Retro Gaming Revival live stream. You've joined us a slightly earlier time, but I think it's going to be definitely worth it. So we'll just jump straight in. For people that need no introduction, our special guests today are the Oliver twins. So thank you very much for joining us today.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Brilliant.
We really appreciate you guys spending the time with us. So just before we sort of dive into any questions, we'll just quickly go through the rest of the panel we got here. So we've got our usual Mr. Blunners.
Hello.
We have our usual Mr. Timbo Slice Triangle Face.
Hello.
And Mr. Dorber.
Evening all.
Great. I mean, like I said, we're really pleased that you've managed to join us tonight. You're two
okay.
legends of the industry, so you need almost no introduction whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I think, yeah, if we'll just kick it off with our first sort of set of questions, and the one that most people love to talk to people who are sort of veterans of the community, or veterans of the games industry is, how did you get started in the games industry? What was it that sort of drew you in?
Can't remember.
I think it's
too long ago.
Similar story. Yeah, it was a long time ago. I guess. I mean, it goes back to about sort of 79, 80. So a long time ago. God, I can't do the math on that. Is it 50 years ago? No, it can't be 40 years ago. So me and Andrew, a bit of sci-fi fans and kind of geeky. So things like 1977 was obviously the release of Star Wars. It's like, whoa! But like that period was just kind of fun. Always talking about sort of science fiction and kind of the future and what it will be and technology. And that was really fascinating to us. And so when we then saw digital watches, funny little handheld kind of pocket, like Game & Watch and things like that with little LED screens and little Space Invaders, and then in the arcades, Space Invaders. That absolutely fascinated us. And we got, I think it was for Christmas 79 or 80, our parents bought us a Pong machine. It wasn't the Atari one, it was kind of a knockoff. I think it was Binatone or somebody like that. And put that under the family TV. And it was black and white, and it's really blocky and everything, but it still was incredibly addictive. And back in those days, the artificial intelligence was very, very poor. But
artificial intelligence, what do you mean? I mean, it's like two bats and it just like goes up or down. I mean,
I was going to say, artificial intelligence would have been a bit of
yeah, you're definitely overselling that one.
Sure. But luckily, Andrew was there, so we actually were able to be kind of fairly evenly matched and actually have some good games. And by diving the switch or pushing the little buttons, you can kind of get a few slightly different versions of the game. Like the bat got like twice as big or half the size, or the ball went twice as big, or maybe you had two balls. I forget what the different options are. And that absolutely really inspired us. A friend of ours had, his dad had an Apple IIe. He worked at the local college in the computer studies department or something. He had an Apple IIe at home. So we're now looking at about 81. And we went around his house and we were just blown away by these games that were on there. We played Zork, Taxman, which is a copy of Pac-Man, Night Mission, which is a pinball game. Why it's called Night Mission, I don't know. There was a top-down racing game that was really kind of quite cool. And we just found all this fascinating. We wanted to compete ourselves. Andrew, do you want to take over a little bit?
Yeah, I have to say, I thought we were going to do a short version. That's quite long. But anyway, I mean, the point is we started to sort of get these home computers, And the benchmark was quite low of what we were trying to do. Is like, can we move a little Pac-Man around the screen and stuff? And we found we could. It would just be really, really slow because we were programming in BASIC. So then we were trying to work out how to program in machine code or assembler, 6502 and Z80. Got a teacher to help us do that. And yeah, we were just obsessed by trying to work out how this stuff works because we loved playing the games and they were quite simple. So we wanted to try and copy them. And then we wanted to try and outdo each other. We'd outdone each other with scores in the games, like I can beat you in that. And then it turned into, well, I can program something and I bet you don't know how I did that sort of thing. So we were trying to beat each other. Then it turned into being collaborative.
Yeah, I was going to say it's quite collaborative because it was once you start just doing techniques, it's like actually rather than just trying to impress ourselves or impress each other, why don't we actually try to make stuff to sort of, I mean, it's all showing off at the end of the day, but why don't we try to make some good games that we can actually sort of brag and show other people? We discovered that our kind of parents weren't kind of, they didn't really get it. They didn't actually understand it. My sister didn't really understand what it was all about. But then we managed to sort of try and impress some of our friends. Again, they weren't that impressed because they'd seen the best. They've seen the best of the best and played the best of the best. So it's like, oh. So, but we just kept kind of up our game. And I guess the first big breakthrough we had was entering a TV competition, the Saturday show.
Yeah.
And we were absolutely delighted because we won first prize. The game we entered, not very good at all, but we won first prize, and that really spurred us on to kind of do better because you kind of look at it yourself and go, God, I wish we made a better game and entered a better game.
It's live. It was live national TV. We got the phone call on Saturday saying, "Can you get to the
Thursday evening?"
Oh, it's Thursday
evening. We got a phone
Can you get to the sort of TV studio for a live show that will go out like across the country? And it was like, well, yeah, we can do it. But then when you're back to school on the Monday, you are properly labelled as the geeks. I mean, people didn't even know they had computers. But it's like, if you can imagine now, if you suddenly just won X Factor but hadn't told anyone you were even doing it, and you just suddenly turned up, it's like you kind of you live with that. And it was okay because people did call us geeks and stuff, and occasionally it was slightly nice if they called us whiz kids. But it was all right.
They weren't that nice.
They're probably
we
jealous.
loved it. It was just slightly embarrassing, but it's like, oh, it just spurs you on to do better.
Yeah. Just, I mean, and every game you just try to do better. I mean, okay, there's some comments about Dizzy, and obviously you all know about Dizzy. But I mean, each time we released a Dizzy, it's like it was always, in our eyes, not good enough. It's like, God, I wish we'd have done this. Oh, God, I wish we'd have done this. And so, hence the reason you do sequels, because sequels are there to sort of patch up all the things you wish you'd have done first time, right?
One thing I loved about that clip, I saw the clip of you guys on the show, and the presenter saying, "Oh, you've got a nice computer at home, so we're going to have a high resolution monitor, whatever that is." And he didn't know what it was. It's just like the people in that time didn't know. They didn't know what it was.
I have to say that prize, although it took flipping 6 to 8 months to turn up, but God, it took a long time to turn up. But it was absolute godsend because back in those days, you were using the family TV for most things. Now we'd migrated to actually having an old little portable kind of TV. I think it might have even been black and white. I'm not absolutely sure at that point.
Yeah,
probably.
I think it was.
But even if it was really dodgy.
And you're plugged in with a TV aerial. It's fuzzy as hell. I mean, it's quite hard to read text. And we are talking low resolution text. Like,
and you're still having people reading when you're typing it. It's like, so getting that monitor was phenomenal. We would never have justified £400 in today's money, because inflation is about 3 times from the early 80s through to now. It's about 3 times. So £1,200 for a monitor for school kids. It's like, we'd have never justified that spend.
High resolution. Actually, I think it might have been a 512.
Yeah. But as a result,
then.
because you were no longer
clear.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, and I still have it. I've got a lot of props, but they're in the log, so we won't do that. We won't walk the camera up there.
No,
but I still have it. It still works, and actually, it was a brilliant screen, and it really, really helped us. Even though we didn't know we needed it, there's a few things along the way that we didn't know we needed, but we luckily ended up doing it. And actually, you look back on it and say that was actually key to our success. So, for example, doing Panda sprites, making a sprite package. We had no idea while making it. We just thought, we know how to print sprites on the screen. Wouldn't it be cool if we did a little package which we let other people print sprites on the screen? But the fact that we'd made that middleware made it phenomenally fast for us to make a lot of games ourselves.
Yeah.
So it was well worth that investment. But we didn't do that investment with the idea that we would use it to make loads of those games really fast. But we did. And that was actually important.
We made a tool set and a package that was easy to use because we thought, well, we did sell it. It was just nobody bought it. But no, because what you found is we found loads of people just sort of bodging, like which were making games, bodging things, typing in lots of data tables and all this sort of stuff to do graphics. And it's like, oh, bloody hell, that's hard work. So we were trying to say, well, we'll make some nice tools and we'll sell them. They'll be a bit slow because we weren't brilliant programmers, but it didn't matter because they were a tool set. But in doing that sort of stuff, we learned the tricks. But then we had nice tools to make games with. The other secret of our success, which was a sort of happy accident, is the fact that we chose to buy an Amstrad because it had a disk drive and you could plug in an assembler, which was like on a ROM chip that you plug it in the back. That kind of thing was common on the BBC, but it wasn't on things like Spectrums. So we were writing games on the Amstrad because we found it easier to program and we had a disk drive. I mean, you don't want a Spectrum with one of those little tape drive things. Oh, I heard those were a nightmare. People would lose work. So we were writing these games, but then obviously most of the sales were on the Spectrum. So Codemasters.
And all the sales were on tape.
Yeah, so we did Super Robin Hood on the Amstrad. We were carried on into just making a sequel, which was kind of Ghost Hunters, similar thing, but just changed the style of graphics. And then the guy who's converting it to the Spectrum was just taking ages and ages. And every now and then we whinged to Dave Darling about it, sort of saying, that guy who you asked to copy our game across the Spectrum is taking ages. And he just gave us a Spectrum and said, well, do it yourself next time and don't whinge about other people. But he gave us a Spectrum. And it was just like, okay. So we thought, well, we don't really know what to do with it. And like, you can't type on those funny little rubber keys. And it's like, I can't imagine programming that thing. But one of our friends, this was the point that we would just finish school. One of our friends had gone to a polytechnic doing electronics. And we were like, this thing, can we like hook it up in some way? And he said, you can make it think it's the printer. So on the Amstrad, you plug it in like it's a printer and it receives the signal. So you can just like do a memory dump straight from the Amstrad, straight to the Spectrum and see if you can get it running. And so we played around with it almost as an experiment and we got it working. So we were programming the Spectrum via the Amstrad, but then that made us make an engine that ran on both systems. So whenever we wrote a game, it kind of worked on both systems, which increased speed considerably. But everybody nowadays, well, in sort of console world, you have your PC for your development and your screens, and then you have your slave computer like plugged in. It's like, well, we had that on Spectrum incredibly early, and it doesn't matter. You run code, it crashes. It doesn't matter because your development environment is still running. So you just send it down, you fix the bug while it's still code on the screen, send it down again, and it's just there. And that was just amazing. When
like it did actually take a while to compile, like a few minutes and maybe 5 minutes to recompile.
But it was nothing compared to what
a lot quicker than what other people were doing. I mean, if their Spectrums crashed and they were using a tape drive or whatever, they're like, God help them. It's like there'll be it would almost feel like another day later before they can try again. I was just going to say that we did do the doing graphics on graph paper and converting it into code, and it was that exercise of doing sprites on graph paper, then turning it into binary.
It's like we're never doing that again. It was all right.
It's like, we're not doing that again. But that game shipped. I mean, that was KV on the BBC. Looks a bit like that.
Captain Caveman,
And it did actually. I mean, it did ship, but it's just we found it quite painful to do. So we thought we're going to do our own kind of sprite package, which was a sprite editor for first and foremost. But then we developed the code to print it really fast on screen, and then created the package to then sell out to people. So it had a sprite editor and a sprite engine.
That's
which is
But this is why the sort of stories from people like yourselves are just so incredible, because you just can't imagine having to do something like that in today's world. I mean, my son is studying video game design. Well, he's just finished his 2-year video game design course at college, and he's now wants to take that further and go to university. And he's like me, possibly a tad further. He's just obsessed with gaming, and he wants to build worlds and tell stories. And he was showing me some of the project work that he's done, and it looks amazing. It is absolutely incredible. But they're all using Unreal Engine 3, Unreal Engine 4, and whilst it's still hard work that whilst it still sounds quite difficult, the things he's having to do, it's a lot of it is pre-built plugins, which you just kind of build the environment with those plugins. They having to do some of the things.
You can never do these things from scratch these days. I mean, the amount of code required to drive a modern game is just insane, and you can only do it by having all these different elements that have been designed by many thousands of people before you. You can't go straight to the metal and just write all the code yourself, which is what we used to have to do in 8-bit days. I'd say that change happened around the PlayStation 1 era. So up until PlayStation 1, you could kind of write all the code yourself and have no plugin modules at all. PlayStation 1 came along, and out of the box, they gave you a bit of an engine and said, you're going to have to use that, guys. And we're not letting you write to the engine. But then very, very quickly, it got to the point PlayStation 2 came along, and it's not just about a few, here's how you print polygons with our engine. This is how you set up 3D worlds and stuff with a system that you buy off the shelf, or you license off the shelf.
Well, it was all renderware and then Unity and Unreal.
Well, eventually it became
PlayStation 3.
Yeah. I mean,
somewhere in there was BlitzTech that we wrote, but hey, but that's what we used to use.
I mean,
we had a team of about 20 people writing all of our stuff to create that kind of similar kind of engine. And you know what? It did compete well with Unity and Unreal for a while.
Yeah, I mean that kind of segues us quite nicely into sort of like another topic of discussion that we'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on, and that is, have you enjoyed seeing the industry change over the years, whether that's from the games development perspective, or the types of games that people can kind of come out with now versus what they could?
We've witnessed how the games industry changed over the years.
I think
some of it's good and some of it's bad.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because there's the story when we wrote Ghostbusters. I think it was when we wrote Ghostbusters, and we were talking to a journalist who sort of dismissed it because we said, like, this is going to be really, really big in the future, like video games.
It's actually Super Robin Hood. I know where you're going with this story, Andrew. It's Super Robin Hood.
Oh, was it Super Robin Hood? But we just said,
Trevor Porter, I just remembered his name, the reporter, basically said, make the most of it while you can, guys, because this is a passing fad.
Yeah, and it's like, and
we were, what it was, wasn't it?
We just talked to him about how excited we were about computers and this new type of entertainment, and it was going to be amazing, and it would be bigger than films and bigger than music, which is kind of is. But he's looking at like really crappy graphics, and it's like, but we could see that the crappy graphics were getting better every 6 months. There'd be a new computer. This was back in the 8-bit days, and it's like, and we said, can you imagine, like in years to come, like you'll be James Bond and it will look exactly like the film, but you'll be completely in control and you'll be like making all the decisions. And he just sort of laughed at us, and it's just like, well, we had this vision, but then over the years you sort of like, you get closer and closer, but there's the uncanny valley that the closer you get, the worse it becomes in some ways. And it's actually really, really hard, and you have no idea how difficult it is to sort of like actually realize that point. I mean, obviously we're pretty much there. I mean, it does, you do a double take and stuff if you're playing something like a Red Dead Redemption and you're going, oh my god, it's just like there are things where you go, no, that's kind of what we talked about. But the amount of steps and technologies, we kind of, in some ways, we underestimated how difficult it will be. But then, having said that, look how unbelievably powerful computers are. I mean, it's just obscene.
Look how unbelievably powerful these things are in your hand, and how fast they are. And I mean, their resolution is like, well, it's more resolution than my eyes can handle. So.
Even when I watch like Blu-rays, I can't believe how clear that picture is.
Yeah,
it's just unbelievable.
It's done that extra jump now with 4K as well, hasn't it? Where 4K is just.
I've got a 4K polarized 3D TV, and if I put on one of my 3D Blu-rays, it is so much better than the cinema. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
It is just crazy because it's all sort of, well, it's the same resolution, but it's obviously on a 60-inch screen rather than a 40-foot. But it's.
You mean you haven't got a 40-foot in your house, Andrew?
Sorry?
You haven't got a 40-foot screen in your house?
No, strangely enough, I don't.
It's in the garden.
No, the thing is, I'm going to the cinema on for the first time in ages on Saturday. But actually, I remember going to the cinema a few times, like last year before this whole lockdown, and the frame rate's rubbish. It's like it's funny because I don't know whether it's just because we work with games and you sort of scrutinize things, but actually you see those slow pans and it's like, I can just see the 24 frames a second or whatever. And it's like, my TV does 400K with everything, which looks super glossy and super real. Go to the cinema and go, it's all sort of blurry and a bit steppy.
They gave it a good start. We're really good at segueing into other things as well. So while we're on the topic of frame rate, I took my mother-in-law years ago to go and see I think it was the second Hobbit movie, which they did in
that was done in stupidly high resolution, fast frame rate. It was an experiment. I thought it was fantastic. The actual the big set pieces, the battles, all this that was where it was faultless. The trouble that it had in sort of keeping the story momentum going was it was so clear for so much of the time that it looked like people in dress up. It didn't look like Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit. I heard a lot of people saying that it didn't look quite real. And when you watch TV and it's super high res and super glossy, you kind of accept that it is like game shows and things like that, and it has a different look. Whereas cinema films, because I've gone to quite a few things like SIGGRAPH where they have these film directors, and they were saying films for cinema have a certain look and a feel, and like giving it stupidly high resolution actually slightly ruins it because you can see every detail and it doesn't quite look right. I don't know. It's like when you're doing video games. I always like, I do quite a lot of judging of university projects and stuff. And I love it when people attack all the graphics and say, we've done it in a style. It's like, because you can be true to a style, but like half the people will go, we went for realism. And it's like, well, it just looks a bit rubbish. It's like, because you can't do it. And it's like, now movies are kind of slightly stylized and they have a certain look about them. And TV programs have a different, very glossy look. And it does sometimes not work. With something like Hobbit, it's like, it just looks a bit weird.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to scroll through the chats. We've got quite a lot of people sort of sharing their stories and that kind of thing here. So just going to pop up a couple of bits here. So we've got some people that maybe some people that maybe never played it.
That was a great breakthrough for us. I hope it was on the Amstrad version and not the Spectrum version, because we didn't write the Spectrum version. And definitely, hopefully, it wasn't the C64 version, because that actually but write that one.
He's playing on the Evercade, so that's the Nintendo version.
Oh yeah, we wrote that. That's okay. I was going to say, that's good. Well, I wrote some of that code as well. I remember writing some of that
Is it 50-50?
And we did the math. Well, I mean, a lot of the coding and design of the games was kind of 50-50, all the way through up until we went to 16 bits. At 16-bit, Andrew took the lead and started learning it. I had already gone sort of into managing people, and we had offices and all this kind of stuff, and I started to get bogged down in that. I did learn 68,000. I did do, what was it? I did a lot of the Panic Dizzy on the Mega Drive Genesis. Don't look at it, but I did it, so I can write it. But yeah, I kind of decided that I don't seem to have enough time for this anymore with everything else that's going on, which was actually true. I mean, it genuinely was true.
Just talking about the Evercade, I mean, and those games. I mean, they're all Nintendo games. So we wrote a lot of Nintendo games, and obviously there was a little bit of a falling out while we left Codemasters. 11. Is that how maybe we wrote? But I have to say,
actually, we wrote 10 of them, because Treasure Island Dizzy. We didn't write Treasure Island Dizzy on there, so we wrote 10.
Okay. Anyway, the Nintendo was a really interesting machine because it was Nintendo coming into the market, effectively copying or using the chipset from the Commodore 64, which had been a few years before. So we'd been down on the
just using the same chips and the same kind of.
Yeah, it's the same chips off the shelf.
Slightly nicer.
Yeah, and everything just looked rich and clean. And I have to say, it's a more basic computer than something like the Amstrad. But it scrolled the screen and it had the hardware sprites, and it just looked really quite nice. So even though programming it felt quite basic, they do look slick and they do look timeless because they have a certain style about them. And I loved writing all those NES games. We put out quite a few. Unfortunately, quite a few never actually came to market. So we got a bit disillusioned by Codemasters and left. Until now, yes, and now they're out.
People still love playing those games now, don't we? We still got people playing NES, and with these Evercade cartridges coming out, we're still playing the retro games, and that's we do this retro gaming revival.
It would have been so much nicer if they'd come out at the time, though.
Yeah. So what I'll do is, it's all right if I just take it back a little bit.
Of course, sure.
I know Nick said about Super Robin Hood in the chat.
Yeah.
I've done some research.
I didn't read the rest of the sentence. I just heard Super Robin Hood and said.
He said it's his favourite game he's playing on the Evercade.
Was it the Amstrad version? That's all I want to know.
No, Evercade.
The Evercade one.
Yes, of course.
But I've done some research. Here's my notes. So Super Robin Hood, I've heard that it only took a month to actually program.
Amstrad, the original, yeah.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
I was going to say all of our games did. We basically set ourselves a goal of a game a month. And in fact, fast food, we tried to do in a weekend, just because we figured that fast food was a lot easier than the other games we were making. So we set ourselves the challenge of a weekend. What happened was it was Friday late afternoon, and one of the things we'd always done when we were trying to learn how to program computers, kind of in like a few years previous, is we always wanted to recreate Pac-Man, and we loved Pac-Man, and so we tried writing Pac-Man on the BBC, tried it on the ZX81, didn't work. Tried it on the Dragon, we managed to get kind of a little Pac-Man going around a kind of a basics thing. It was a bit slow, a bit rubbish and everything. Then we got our BBC, we tried it on that, and it's like, no, really can't do it. And then we kind of forgot about it and started making kind of games that started becoming more and more successful, and sprite packing and everything else. And then we were just chatting about this one Friday afternoon whilst working on some other big game that we're taking on. And we said, we won't ruin our schedule if we just made it get a version of Pac-Man over the weekend. Like if we stop at 5 o'clock and then on 9 o'clock Monday morning, we're back on the proper big game, I think it was Grand Prix Simulator 2, then it won't really ruin our schedule. So why don't we do it? Because it'll be really, really easy now. And by Monday morning, we had all 30 mazes, we had all the enemies in, we had pretty much everything. It actually, sadly, it got delayed because by that time, we'd actually got a graphic artist who lived in Sheffield, and we had to send cassettes or discs to them, and they'd improve our graphics and just go and kind of draw over some of the graphics and then send them back. So that took a week or so for that to happen, and then we got David Whittaker to go and do the music, I believe, and we had to sort of give him a phone call and say, we've kind of made the game. It's a little bit of a maze game. I've stopped using that brand's name. It's a little bit of a game inspired by something. Could you send us some music and some sound effects? And then we had to kind of bolt them in afterwards, and then gave the Codemasters. And unfortunately, due to some weird politics, they tried branding it the Happy Eater game. And after about 2 months, they gave up with that and then just released it with Dizzy in it instead.
Wow.
But it did fundamentally, I'd say that 90% of it was done over the weekend.
That's amazing.
And with no sleep.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean,
and it went on to sell over 100,000 copies, by the way.
Right. The question was more.
Oh, and that was two formats.
Taking a month.
That was Amstrad and Spectrum in the weekend.
Yes, right.
That's impressive.
The question was about Robin Hood. It was pretty much done in a month. I mean, then it sort of drags around a little bit with some, as Philip says, you go to an artist and ask for a title screen or a bit of graphics or a bit of music, but you kind of,
But by that time, you've already started the next project.
you're on to the next one. So we were
Yeah,
sort of getting them sort of crossing over slightly. But yeah, that was that's how we got so many games out. That's why we're in the Guinness Book of Records for the most number of games
Nice.
and least amount of sleep. We were just obsessed, and yeah, I don't know.
I mean, we've got we wrote over 50 games, and that's different. Was that different titles? I'm just trying to think how the maths was worked out. They basically came up with the number 51. I'm just trying to think, was that SKUs or was that individual?
No, it's actual games. It is actual games.
Yeah. So therefore, there's even more SKUs because we did different SKUs as well, and then we have people converting the SKUs as well. Sorry,
there's a lot of games.
That's incredible.
Yes, unbelievable.
Can I just ask a question that I saw pop up? He said, what would you do if you could take an iPad back 50 years? It is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. If you think what the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is, that's what it is.
It's that plus it's an iPad with Wikipedia.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It is crazy, isn't it, to think about that in just even in terms of technology. I know we're sort of just showing our phones. I'd love to be able to go back to secondary school when my teachers would say, you won't have a calculator in your pocket every day.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah. I always used to think about that. It's like, I've got all of the internet in my pocket now. You know? I think we would
all of human knowledge is right there.
It's insane. Yeah.
And we can just talk to it, ask it a question, and it was
mad, isn't it?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You had to look at the screen. Like
there's a really good interview I saw with David Bowie actually, and he's talking about the internet, and he kind of describes what the internet is like now, and he's talking about, this is going to become this big thing, and this is how it's going to work. We're all going to be connected. It's going to grow, and this interview is just going, it's just data, isn't it? No, and he's looking at it like he's mad. He's like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But you go back and watch it out, I think that actually is bang on. It's spot on the money of what the internet ended up being.
And when did he give that? And when did he give that interview?
Oh, I'd have to go and look it up.
I do absolutely find it fascinating looking at people's predictions they made of the future. There's obviously the Back to the Future, the movie, and there's a kind of a couple of interesting predictions in there that are absolutely well off, and there's actually some that are bang on. But flying cars, sorry, no. Hoverboards, no. But actually, people on electric scooters, yes. So you just missed by a bit. But I don't know. I went through a bit of a phase a year or so ago. It's probably when lockdown started. Of watching the old Tomorrow's World.
World channel. It's hilarious. The inventions that we all just rely on now, and they're just talking about them, thinking the VR one is the funniest because it's obvious everybody's sick.
This is a phone without wires.
Yes, he's got the dial pad attached to him, hasn't he? He walks out into it. Yeah.
Have you seen the sat nav? The sat nav was a tape recorder, so you can pre-record the tape to send your driver out, and it will say you should in front of you see a left. Take this road, and basically it's just a pre-recorded cassette. And he basically puts it in a tape player and says, "This is kind of a precursor to." They're hoping to develop this technology so that it can do more than one trip. Because it's just a pre-recorded data cassette.
Amazing.
People will be looking at that going, how is that ever practical? But you actually look at it and the guy's just driving along and saying, please take the next left. So he takes the next left. It's just if you think about it, it's an audio cassette tape. But it's the vision. The vision's there.
The vision was there. It's hilarious to watch it. But there's a bunch of they did one on internet shopping, internet shopping, obviously before the internet, and it was like they had this computer just with kind of knobs and dials, and then it was saying kind of, would you like to buy a dress? And he was like, oh, okay, so I've got to push the third button here and do this dial to say what size dress I want. It's hilarious.
Anyway, moving on.
Let's go. Yeah. Right. So he's
working on some 2D game, and it's taking him forever. I mean, my tip to him is it was all about trying to set very achievable goals. Some people just, if you think of like making a demo and do something that is achievable within a month or so, then you'll get to the end and you'll either decide it's the end and I want to spend another month and make it better, but you feel that you've got the goal. Or
you just release
you do
it,
another,
which
or
is
you
what we
do
always
another
used to
demo, and you
DLC.
yeah, you just do a sequel. No, but the point is, what we find is, I mean, we've obviously had a lot of success over the years, and people say, well, how did you sign contracts with like Disney for Epic Mickey? Like, that's just like massive multi-million contract. It's like, it's all about the ladder, and it's all the steps over the years is every game is better than the last one, and you just pitch it up and pitch it up and pitch it up. Whereas people suddenly think, my God, like, how did you do that? Like, and it's like, well, it's just
wasn't magic. It was hard work for 20 years beforehand.
Yeah, it's just years and years of building up to things and the experience and building upon it and working hard. But people now do something like they set themselves a target which is like a year out, and it's just too long. I mean, we did a game, Taz Wanted, which they said, oh, you're very lucky, we're giving you 2.5 years. Oh, we hated that project. It just never went away. I mean, it's a good game and it's big and it went out and stuff. But I tell you, it's like you're kind of a year in and you're thinking, oh, we're not even quite halfway yet. And you kind of want to just see the back of it. You just kind of, and it's never good to be on a project where you just want it over. It's just so you're all still excited if it's within a month or two. So just set the expectations smaller, and then
go for quality.
Like, mini goals.
Yeah.
But if people like creation, then I can't say too much because it's a secret project, but what me and Andrew are doing at the moment is extremely exciting. And for any creatives, just go to panavox.com and sign up. You'll be first to learn about it.
Interesting.
And
interesting.
Hopefully this will once and forever mean that people will stop talking about Dizzy quite so much when they refer to us, and they'll talk about the new things. We've been saying that for a long time, and everybody still goes back to Dizzy. But what we're doing is very, very exciting. So.
Excellent.
Wow.
We'll look forward to that.
We can't talk about it because we haven't launched it yet. So.
Well,
what I can say is that anybody that turns around and says, "Where did these guys think about that? How did they do that? It came from nowhere." It's like, it didn't come from nowhere, mate. It's like we've been doing this for 40 years. It's like it's kind of a progression ladder. It's like, and this is obviously where I was going to say it leads to, but hey, we'll probably do something after that as well.
Yeah. Okay.
It's still not too old for doing new stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this could slightly segue us nicely into another area that we would probably quite like to talk about, which is obviously you've mentioned Dizzy. We will probably have a Dizzy question because I think the people that are on our page in the chat would probably never forgive us if we didn't ask you something.
I don't know where that last bloody coin is. All right, let it go.
I'll hold off on any Dizzy related stuff until we've sort of come to the part where we'll talk about the Evercade and that kind of thing. But if we can segue onto some of the other things that you have done. So what are some of the other creations that you've worked on that you've either created or written for that you are particularly proud of, that either people maybe aren't aware that you're involved with, or things that
it's
people
always much more
overtly
spicy to say which ones would you rather not have written. But anyway, we'll go with the good. We'll go with the good one. Robin Hood was a good one in those days. But I mean, things like working on Epic Mickey and if you've seen Puss in Boots for the movie, I mean, that was flipping awesome. The game looks absolutely incredible. It plays amazingly as well. One thing I would say is that
I thought pulling out
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. There is a slight difference, and I have to say we shouldn't take all the credit because clearly there is a big dev team. I mean, things like Epic Mickey was it 800 people, Andrew?
It was a silly number of people. The problem is I had the word epic in the title because people were saying this is a bit too bloody big, and it's like, so we cut it down, and they're like, well, it's got epic in the title. It's a bit hard to cut down now.
Brilliant.
Anyway, But and I would actually say with Puss in Boots, there were probably 50 or 60 people. So we shouldn't take too much credit. We were involved. We didn't do any of the coding. We didn't do the graphics. We were more involved in the sort of design meeting and hiring people and making sure that the right people fitted the right spot, etc., and the kind of overall vision of it. So in the latter days, we've got to be careful. Yeah. Got to be careful not to take too much credit for the ones in the earlier days. The 8-bit ones, it's easy to take loads of credit. Thank you very much, Andrew. We can see Epic Wiki too. So I mean, they're amazing.
Shells of games there.
I mean, so things like that are absolutely incredible. But we shouldn't take the credit for them because actually there were big dev teams and lots of people involved in them. I mean, a big one that is still liked and still people play it and refer to it, and that is Fusion Frenzy. Everybody loves Fusion Frenzy. Where's Fusion Frenzy? You're going to get it.
On the shelf.
Yeah. So,
where is it?
but again, that was another big dev team. I think there were about 20 people on that.
No.
So I say big. That's nothing compared with Assassin's Creed. I mean, Assassin's Creed, it's or Red Dead Redemption. I mean, they're up in the thousands. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Who would have ever predicted that back in the 8-bit days?
Yeah.
It's like you have dev teams in the thousands. It's crazy.
I know you guys have done a lot of movie tie-ins and stuff. And I saw on another interview you guys did that you had to work on. I think it was Ghostbusters 2. And you hadn't actually been able to watch the film yet. You'd only had.
Oh no! So you can't. So on none of the films can we watch them.
Wow.
So that's the fact of life. So we first learned that with Ghostbusters 2 when we wrote that on the Amstrad Spectrum. Is that we're the last guys to see it. We're unimportant. But it's not just that. The film hasn't been made yet.
Yeah.
So when we're doing dev, the film hasn't been made. Oh yeah, okay, that's not the best.
I didn't even know there was a game.
Very nice.
I didn't even know.
Oh, it's not the best game.
Bad Boys for Life.
Wow.
To be honest, the game itself is all right. The problem is that it came out just after Grand Theft Auto 3. And so everybody compares it with Grand Theft Auto 3.
Yeah.
It in itself was quite good. But then you look at Grand Theft Auto 3 and go, yeah, it's not as good as that, is it? It's on the same shelf, the same price. And it's like, yeah, okay, leave it. Like, anyway, I mean, they did have about 50 times the budget of us. But unfortunately, the customer doesn't know that. The customer sees it's the same price on the shelf. So, so we, like, when we're agreeing to make a game up front, we don't know what we're making. For a start, you always have to pitch a game where you don't know what the material is that you're pitching, what the levels are, and how many characters. You don't know any of that. So you basically have to sort of gauge what you think the customer can afford, and then if you can kind of win the gig, then you make the game. And then if you've won the gig, they'll give you some of the materials. The problem is the materials you get is a black and white script, and you go, oh, for a bit more than that. But with Ghostbusters 2, you've got Ghostbusters 1 as a reference, so you know what all the main characters look like and stuff. In fact, with Ghostbusters 2, it's a bad example because we were handed a design anyway, so we just kind of did it to the design.
Well, we did Mummy Returns. That was a sequel.
And if you look at Mummy Returns, we just looked at number 1. We just went down Woolworths, bought the film off DVD or
VHS tape.
VHS tape. Looked at that, read the script and go, well, we can kind of see what the main characters look like. We've got the script of the new one. We know what the scenes are. What was it? The museum, Andrew, that you went to?
The British Museum. We went to the British Museum.
Yeah, so you basically went down to the British Museum and took a load of photographs and little schematics and stuff, because the whole first kind of 20 minutes of that movie is based in the British Museum. So you then model the British Museum and warehousing out the back, which you don't really get to see, but you can imagine what warehousing out the back of the museum looks like. But we didn't, so we had actually completely made that game, completely finished the game before we saw anything. I mean, and we know they had more material. We know that they had, they could have taken shots on set and they could have given them to us, but they didn't. Not the best relationship we had in the world with those people, but we won't talk about that too much. But then we went along to E3, and Universal had a massive stand. The game was there on the big screen. People are playing it. Still hadn't seen the movie. In fact, we went that night to go and watch it whilst we were over in LA because it launched that week. And then of course, because it launched that week and E3 was on, people would go and watch it, then come in the next day to E3, reviewers and people, and go, it's all right. You didn't really capture that scene very well. You didn't capture that scene very well. And it's like
you're guessing, aren't you? You don't know.
How do you do that?
That's mad.
We just used to wing it. I mean, that's all you could do.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I've just got a huge amount of respect now for people that have developed things like Ghostbusters on the NES and that kind of thing.
Oh,
It's just
hold up, Andrew. Hold up. Your game of the poster box.
Oh, look, fake game of the poster.
Yeah. So we signed up to do Bad Boys 2, right? And we had to basically judge how much we could get out of the client, because the bigger the amount of money they gave us, the more people we could put on the dev team, therefore more art, more design, more programming, blah, blah, blah. So we pushed it as much as we could, which, by the way, it was Empire, so it wasn't very much. But no script. No script turned up. And then it was like, well, we can't give you the script and we don't want to give you the script. And what we want to do is actually for you to tell a slightly different story in Miami about these two guys. And we go, well, we can see the logic. And at the time, it was the time of the James Bond game that had just come out. Nightfire, was it? Was from EA or something? I think
they decided not to follow the film.
And they decided not to follow the film because it's actually really difficult to live up to the film. So we kind of understood the argument and got the argument, so it's fine. And they go, oh, yeah. By the way, can you not use a red Ferrari? It's like, in fact, not for a Ferrari at all.
Well, we didn't have the license.
We don't have the rights to that. So anyway, we crack on and we're doing the little story and everything. And they go, oh, and also, you know the two main actors? Could you not make it look like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence?
What?
We don't have the rights. You have to pay them to make it like right.
And so, and it's like, you know the music tracks from the first movie and stuff. Yeah. Try not to sound like that. It's like, and anyway, we basically worked out that the only rights that they bought, if they were still in business, I wouldn't be allowed to say this legally, I'm sure. But the only rights they bought was the poster rights. They're allowed to put the poster on the front of the box.
Wow,
that's
ridiculous. Yeah,
and then we had to make a game that effectively lived up to that poster. As I said, not the best game ever. It's all right, but yeah. I mean, but when you consider what we were working with, and by the way, quite a few people in reviews criticised. Don't those graphic artists, can't they make their characters look like Martin Lawrence and Will Smith?
We've been told not to.
We're allowed
Yeah, you can't. Wow.
Yeah. That's insane.
There's a lot of politics behind the scenes. So I mean, there's a lot of games that sometimes don't even get to the market. So there you go.
Yeah, we've made a lot of games that never came out.
I mean that reminds me of a pitch, sort of segueing into film again. I really like hearing filmmakers and film writers chat about projects that didn't come to be. And one of my favourite documentaries about a film that never got made is The Death of Superman Lives, which is talking about the Tim Burton Superman movie, which Nicolas Cage was going to be Superman. And there's an incredible section during that where I don't know if it's necessarily in the documentary, but Kevin Smith has talked about it at length because he wrote the original script, which then got transitioned many times before it became the shooting script. And he talks about John Peters, who was a film producer at the time, who basically read the script, said, "Yep, love it. Got some notes though about Superman. Can we get rid of the cape? And also, can you make it so that he's not in a blue and red costume? And also, can he not fly?" And he's like, "What? You know who Superman is? Right? Superman is it? Superman.
I've heard similar sort of like crazy stories.
Walking down the street.
Do not know what the hell they're working with.
So here's one. We were asked to do an extra level in a SpongeBob game. It's SpongeBob Skate Surf. We had 8 months to ship this game on a Wii, and 8 months is not long to do a game. It was actually on Wii and Connect. Oh, he's going to go and find the box. And we were having problems.
Put them all.
Wow.
No, that's Krusty Krab, Andrew. Andrew, wrong SpongeBob game. We did lots of SpongeBob games. Wrong one. Anyway, Skate and Surf. It was on Connect and it was on Wii, I believe. Skate and Surf. What was really funny was the producer actually said to us one day, we need some more levels, and we noticed you've got these surf levels, which are like That's a different one again.
No, it's another one.
It's not
Anyway,
but we notice that you've got these basically skate and surf, as it sort of suggests in the title, is a little bit like Crash Bandicoot in the fact that it's long winding paths, and on some of those long winding paths you're skating, and on some of them you're surfing. And the producer said to us one day, there aren't enough levels, we've got to get more gameplay hours in here. I was thinking that perhaps you could drain the water out of the surf levels to create some more skate levels.
yeah.
Because that works, doesn't it?
Yeah,
We just let the plug out and let the water drain away. It's like, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, doesn't make any sense.
Unbelievable.
It's mad, absolute madness.
The one on Mummy Returns was always a bit of a laugh. Well, it wasn't a bit of a laugh, actually. It was a pain in the arse. Is that the producer had seen a PlayStation 2 a tech demo of every hair on a model's head being individually modeled and moving independently with true physics.
I think it was probably an NVIDIA demo, actually. I think it was an NVIDIA demo. And he was
anyway,
like, we want that in our game. And it was like, well, how's it going to make it any better? It's like, for the fact we can't do it. It's like, but if all the processors trying to animate the person's hair, like,
so this producer just gave us an absolute, like, ridiculous stick over the fact that not every hair had been modelled on the actor's head of the main character running around, or others. And, like, and this was the period where you were lucky if Lara Croft had one long ponytail that swam.
Yeah.
You were lucky to get that.
Yeah.
But this producer had seen this demo, and until we gave our characters flowing hair where all the independent things were physics-based, then they weren't signing off milestones. It's like,
That's just insane.
Madness.
Yeah, I have to say, we have, I mean, we've got some really weird horror stories in the fact that we did work with film companies, and what you ended up with is you'd have a producer, and because you're working with an MGM,
we worked with some good
Universal,
ones as well, just in case any of them are watching. We worked with some great ones. Let's just
there were lots of good ones as well. But the thing is, you had these kind of fairly highly paid Americans who were not quite good enough to direct films, but they were like, well, direct a game. And so they'd come across, and they
knew nothing about games.
They played them. That was, so
they played them.
That's probably why they weren't very good at being film directors, because they spent all their childhood playing games on the NES or something.
Yeah.
They played Mario, and it's like suddenly they were like, well, you're not quite good enough to be a film director. Can you go and be a game director and tell those people over in the UK how to do their jobs? And we had some weird things, like they'd fly over and spout a load of stuff and then fly back again. And it was like, oh, what was all that about?
Yeah,
It was just like nonsense.
As you were, get on and make the game we were supposed to be making, and ignore all of that. The best producers we ever had were the ones who basically said, you guys know what you're doing. I'll just sign off the milestones and make sure that the management stays out of your hair at our end.
Brilliant.
They were the best producers. And we had a few of those, actually. Yeah, and you know what? You get brilliant games from it. I mean, Puss in Boots was one of the examples. They absolutely let us just do exactly what we wanted and just sign the milestones off. I don't even know if they loaded them up, and I don't care if they loaded them up, quite frankly. Now go and look at the quality of the game. That's what you can make if you don't get people interfering.
We had one kick-off meeting with the director of Puss in Boots. I went over to Los Angeles for it, me, art director and game designer, and they were just sort of, they took us to their private cinema in DreamWorks, showed us some rough cuts and like storyboards and stuff, and then said, look, you guys know about games, so you make the game that you think is going to work with this or whatever. But then the director said something which was really weird and said, and we took it and ran with it, and it sounded impossible at first, but then actually it's what made Puss in Boots really good. And that is, he said, you know what? He says, I only play a little bit. This is the director of the film. He says, I only play a little bit of these video games, but he says, I am so fed up of seeing the back of the head of the hero. He said, we're always running along. The camera is always behind the character. He said, is there anything you can do about that so that you don't have it? He said, because a film like that would be rubbish. He said, we wouldn't do a film like that. So he said, why don't all games do that? And we said, because you're trying to run into the screen and you need to see where you're going. And he goes,
Yeah.
well, if you can do something about it, he goes, you'd make me really happy. So I don't know if you can see it, but we certainly, if you now look at that game,
You're never going to see it.
no, you're never going to see
gonna
it.
see that.
But that one there, you're climbing up the clock tower, left and right and right and left. You're climbing up the clock tower, but the viewpoint is looking down on top of him. So usually if you're climbing up the side of a building, the camera is behind him and you see the back of his head and he's climbing. We actually had it so that he was sort of hanging off it, and we put the camera right in his face coming up. And it feels really cool.
It is.
No
And actually, the thing is,
not much gameplay on a ladder. So
exactly. It's like,
gameplay.
You want to go up or down? It's like,
and we did a few tricks like that, and it actually does feel really nice. And that was just a film director just sort of saying, like, he said, just do what you can. He goes, but I'm fed up of seeing backs of heads of characters in video games.
But that creates like a bit of an interesting dynamic, doesn't it, for you as creators? It's like, well, I don't really know what to do, but can you do something about that? That it just kind of gives you, if you're creatives like yourselves, there's a little spark, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I like that. Sort of sticking with the idea.
There was another similar spark. Because this is a good one that I always have with students when they're designing games, and that is so many games are all about killing, and it's shooting and like James Bond things. We were going to do the film for Tomorrow Never Dies, so we'd started. We were a few months into Tomorrow Never Dies, but then it got cancelled. But then we were working with Hasbro on the game Glover. So we showed the Hasbro people our sort of Tomorrow Never Dies demo, and they said, that's really cool. Hey, we own Action Man. Like, can you make an Action Man game? And it's like, yeah, we probably could. And they said, because Action Man effectively is James Bond. I mean, it was this sort of unofficial James Bond toy.
Yeah.
And so they said, the only thing is, because we sell it to kids, Action Man shouldn't have guns and stuff. And obviously the game, we don't want all the guns and violence and sort of the grot wire and stuff.
We don't want deaths. We don't want guns. And what was the other rules? There were a couple of rules about Action Man.
So
no guns, no deaths.
So we looked at our design that we had for Tomorrow Never Dies and our sort of like the work that we'd done on it, and just said, let's change it to tasers and stun guns and frisbees and boomerangs that sort of like take people out, but in a non-lethal way. But it was actually really interesting because we came up with loads and loads of wacky weapons and traps, and it actually made it far more interesting than running down a corridor with a gun or like a bomb. And it worked.
In fact, we went on to do number 2 as well. We did 2.
It worked. It was really fun, really playful, and it became original. And the designers loved the challenge of not making it a bloody gun.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like it's just having that just sort of, it's almost like a challenge, isn't it? Oh, we'd like you to create something like this. However, we'd like it to be a bit like this. So with that one, remove the weapons, remove the kill. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right, so there's a challenge on one of the Metal Gear Solid games. I think it's Metal Gear Solid 3, and there's an achievement or something you get if you complete the game without killing anyone. And you just have to like knock people unconscious and use tranquilizers and stuff. So just it gives you something.
That's one of the rules I try to use in life as well.
It's a good rule, isn't it?
Yeah. Excellent. Right, so sticking with
not that original.
Sticking with the idea,
you can all abide by that rule as well.
Sticking with the idea of creatives and sort of all the different things that you guys will have created and had a hand in creating. I think the thing that a lot of people probably would like to know is the next question that I'm just gonna bring up here, and you sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier, and that is, are there any games or characters that have been abandoned that you would love to go back and revisit? So this is characters that you guys have worked on, or games that you've worked on, projects that just never came to fruition.
Saga.
Yeah. What happened with that?
It got put on hold but we don't know why.
Yeah,
I've only got the mug as a souvenir now.
So the people who told us, the executive producer who told us, he was not told why.
We've got a 3D character straight off a 3D printer.
Brilliant.
That's cracking. I love that.
This again, this company that we worked with, Smilegate, and the producer and stuff, basically said, make the game you want to make, and we did, and it was awesome. And one day he just got told, I've been told the project is on hold, and we said, why? And he says, I don't know, I wasn't told that.
Wow,
it's a shame, isn't it?
And that's it. That was it. It just plug pulled.
It was all to do with budgets and windows, and they said we're not going to release it this year. We're going to release it next year.
We can speculate. We can speculate why it was. I mean, we have many speculations of why it was.
Yeah.
We have about 6 different theories of why it was, but we don't know for sure because they've never told us what it was.
It just stopped. So obviously Dizzy is obviously a big one, but everyone knows that one. So giving another one, Glover. I mean, we loved Glover in the fact that I think it had potential to be a lot more than we ever got there.
Than we ever realised.
We ever realised, because it was supposed to be all about the physics and the physicality of. It started as a crazy golf game, and then rather than trying to have a stick to get a ball around a maze and through obstacles and things, why not have a hand? Why not? But not a severed hand like Adam's family. Let's turn it into a magical glove, and then you can pat it and throw it and whack it and knock it. And then the idea,
whack and roll, all the way through development, it's called whack and roll.
Yeah, it was. But then when we had the glove, we called it Glover. And it was a sort of Mickey glove. It was sort of looked like that. But then there was just the physicality of the fact that the ball would be able to change properties. So you could turn it into a glass ball or a floating ball or a cannonball. And then just the things that you could do with the physics. So you could a bowling ball or exploding ball and all these different things. I just think that has huge potential for gameplay that we never really quite realised. It has a little bit of it.
I mean,
we touched on it, but it could go a lot further and a lot better.
We're always sort of struggling with the tech that you had and the limits of the machine, but also the people. I mean, you've got to remember that behind the scenes of any kind of game, there's a team of people, and you can only use the talents of those people that you've got. And some people can't always see the vision, or can't kind of get on the same page as everybody else, or kind of deliver the bit that they're supposed to deliver. So me and Andrew had a vision, but we couldn't write it because we weren't doing code at that point, or Andrew was on a different project at that point.
And to be fair, the physics was pretty hard. Like back on the machines, it was pretty hard physics.
It was very difficult to do physics on those machines at that point. It was very difficult to build the worlds. The tool set was late. The guy that was supposed to come along and actually do some of the mapping and the tools and everything, he basically turned up. Then he was no good, so we then had to get rid of him and get somebody else in. The artist kept taking it in a different direction. You've got this problem of when building a game that you've got lots of jigsaw puzzle pieces, and they have to be done simultaneously if you're going to hit a schedule. So you actually end up starting to build worlds and build levels before the code is there, before you can really test it and play it. And then when you bring it together, you go,
didn't quite work.
If we knew what we know now, that level would have been designed differently. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of people love doing sequels, is because you can kind of fix all the problems, because you can learn from all the mistakes you made in the first one and then clean it up for the second one and go, this is what we meant to do. And you can kind of take the best bits and throw away the bad bits. The Glover shows lots of shine and lots of promise in what we achieved. And the team did a good job. I'm not going to knock it. And in some regards, they did a brilliant job. But you kind of think, looking back on it, wow, there were so many bits that could have been done so much better. And we did, in fact, go down and write a lot of it for Glover 2. And actually, the team was doing a great job of Glover 2 when it got cancelled. So we were, I don't know, a third or half of the way through, probably about halfway through. And it would have been a lot better. It would have still been constrained by the technicalities of the N64. The N64 had a lot of limits. I mean, there weren't that many polys you could throw around. And the minute you got a glove with a bunch of fingers, that uses up most of them. It's like, which is half your problem. Oh, and a ball needs a few polys as well, if it's not to look like a cube.
Right. what I'm going to do is ask. I'm only
How
going
many
to ask.
polys, Andrew, could you throw around on an N64? Because it wasn't many, was it?
I have no idea. I can't remember those.
It was something like 600 or 800 or something ridiculous.
I remember I did the PlayStation version, and I actually did the PlayStation version afterwards. So I then had to write the physics in without floating point maths, because the PlayStation is integer maths only. So
Yeah.
so it was even harder. So I remember really struggling with trying to get any of the physics working, but I had masses of polygons. The PlayStation 1 would throw a lot of polygons around. Anyway.
Whereas I think it was something like 600 or 800 polygons total is what you're allowed. That's your budget on an N64. And you look at a glove and you look at a ball and you go, they're not.
That's it. Yeah. We've not got much.
Two shapes are the two shapes you shouldn't do when you're polygon limited.
Yeah.
Can't we just do some spaceships and some cars?
Anyway, hang on.
We would get it in the neck if we didn't ask you at least one question surrounding obviously the Dizzy franchise, which is what a lot of people will obviously know you for. Obviously, some of the comments have been popping up here from people watching this evening will now go away when people say Oliver Twins. They're not going to immediately think of Dizzy now. They're going to be thinking of all these incredible stories that you've been telling us. But yeah, we will get it in the neck from people if we don't ask you just at least one Dizzy question.
Yeah.
And I think the one for me is there's lots of stories out there where people have talked to you about Dizzy, and there's lots of things out there about how he came to be. I think the one that I would probably quite like to ask is there was quite a bit of time. There was quite a bit of time between, I think, the last Dizzy game in about '92 until about sort of 2011, I think it was. When
Why was that?
Yeah.
And my question is, what was it like to revisit Dizzy again after almost like a 20-year break?
I suppose when we did a Wonderful Dizzy, that was revisiting, that was redesigning. But the other ones were just trying to get released, the ones we'd already written years ago. That was enough of a struggle, which was, we managed to get them out, and that was great. But I guess going back and actually making Wonderful Dizzy was an interesting challenge and dilemma, because we'd kind of got a good enough relationship with Frank, who's the CEO of Codemasters, that as long as we were giving it away for free, if we wanted to do another retro Dizzy for the community, yeah, go on, you can do it, kind of thing, but don't charge any money for it and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of knew that we had the approval of Codemasters and the CEO to do it. So that's one thing. Then we'd got this, we'd just seen the Crystal Kingdom Dizzy remake happen, and the guys behind that, I can't remember all their names now, it's a couple of years ago, and I basically on Facebook sort of said, that's amazing what you guys have done and everything, and they were quite pleased that I kind of reached out to them and complimented them. But I have to say, they did do an amazing job. Better coders than us, I can tell you, and artists, definitely. I mean, they really opted, although we did actually discover some of the tricks they did when working with them. It's like, wait a minute, you used the whole 128K. We did all of ours in like the 34K of the original Spectrum. Like, you cheated to get your frame rate up. But anyway, let's not go there. We're not bitter. No, just joking. So we now had a bunch of developers that were really, really great on Spectrum. We had the permission of Codemasters to do it. And then, of course, the Spectrum Kickstarter thing. What was it called?
Was it the Spectrum Plus? Next, that's it. Yeah.
Spectrum Next.
Yeah, Spectrum Next.
There somewhere.
So Henrik, we know him, and we saw that he'd launched Kickstarter, and he's a friend. He's a massive Dizzy fan. That one,
wow.
Spectrum Next. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah,
it looks nice.
So
it looks nice. Yeah,
it's really nice. It's
really nice.
Go get it. It's brilliant. Not that I've had time to play one, and actually my one is there. That's mine. It's me.
Not anymore.
I gave it across to Andrew.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Really very nice.
Yeah. Oh, you got a bit of technical difficulties there. He's frozen.
He's gone. He's gone. He's frozen.
Frozen.
It's like the Naked Gun. Where it freezes at the end.
But it was a good freeze face. That was.
It was smiling. That's nice.
Of all the freeze faces to have, it was probably one of the better ones you could have had.
Yeah. It just reminds me of.
Anyway,
Nielsen. Is it Nielsen?
So Leslie Nielsen. The so the Kickstarter thing is launched, and we just thought that we called Henrik up and we said, "This is awesome what you're trying to do, and this must be quite a challenge doing real hardware and everything." And it really is. I mean, financially, the risk you take in making real hardware is just insane. So we basically said, "What you're doing is absolutely amazing for the community. Kind of, we wouldn't go for that amount of risk, but we'd love to help you in some way." And he goes, "Can it make me a Dizzy game?" It's like, ooh, that's a big ask. It's like, that's a bit tricky. Hey, you can write Spectrum games. Like, oh yeah, we used to be able to write Spectrum games, but really. And then I was like, hang on a minute, this is Russian guys I was talking to a few days ago. Oh, well, let me think about that. We might be able to do something. So I went to Andrew and sort of said, look, we could kind of make a new Dizzy game by us designing it and the Russian guys making it. They'll be chuffed. They'll be chuffed because look, they just copied a game and they were happy about that. So if we actually gave them a new game design, they'd be chuffed a bit to do that. So we went back to Henrik and said, yeah, fine, we'll make you a game and we'll do a nice little Kickstarter video for you, which we did the Kickstarter video saying that if you hit the next goal, the next stretch goal, the Olivers will make, because it was us doing the video, we'll make a new Dizzy game. And it was only after we kind of released that video that it kind of dawned on us that was actually a bit of a kind of a stupid thing to say, in the fact that people are expecting us to make a very, very, very good Dizzy game, not an average Dizzy game. But also people have rose-tinted glasses. They have rose-tinted glasses, and what we don't want is for us to make a new Dizzy game and for the reviews to come out and go, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, preferred Fantasy World.
Yeah. I mean, I prefer the other ones. I prefer Fantasy World. I prefer Fantastic Is Bad. It's all right. And it's like, so, and then it just dawned on us. We'd already released the video saying we're going to do it. And it was like, oh, crap. It's like,
let's do it now.
Oh, that's a bit of a problem.
Now.
So
anyway.
We now have to design a game that is absolutely, in fact, no, we haven't quite released the video. We'd agreed to do it, and it was on social media. We agreed to do it. So we then thought, oh crap, we've got to make a game which has to be on paper better, and then obviously hopefully the Russians will make it technically better and they'll make it lovely and everything. But it's got to be better. But we have still the same constraints we used to have, which is it's running on a Spectrum. And it's like, ooh, that's a bit tricky. And I was actually having a bit of a sleepless night. Sorry, Andrew, I'm going to take credit for it, but I can't do it. I was having a bit of a sleepless night about this, thinking, oh God, what have you signed up for here? And then it kind of, I was like, just going through in my head, we're like, well, some of the best stories we've done is where we've kind of taken a classic story and we've redressed it. So we've taken Jack and the Beanstalk, we've taken Wonderland,
that's Alice in Wonderland.
Alice in Wonderland.
Very nice.
Wonderland, you've got to do it, start the other word. You've got to do Alice in Wonderland.
Brilliant.
So we've taken some classic stories and we've kind of redressed them. So I was thinking, that's got to be the starting point. It's got to be the starting point that we take some character, we take a classic story, and we then put our characters onto it. So what classic stories are there that we could do? And we've got to kind of match the characters. And then just suddenly it dawned on me, Wizard of Oz. And I'm like, everybody loves the Wizard of Oz. Everybody knows what the Wizard of Oz is. Wait a minute, Wizard of Oz. You get transported. You've got a bunch of characters. You get transported to a world, and the objective is to get out of that world. And along the way, you meet all these other characters. Wait a minute, the other characters are from Kansas. They're your friends. Wait a minute, we've got the Oak folk who are going to get. We can recast all the Oak folk. And then I did the mapping, and it's like, wait a minute, we've got the same number of characters. And it's like the only character who even have to change sex is the wizard. And yourself, actually, because you're playing Dorothy. So you're Dizzy, playing the Dorothy character. But the wizard has to be a witch. But besides that, every character mapped. And I was like, this is genius. This kind of works. So I went into Andrew the next day and I go, I've got the solution. It's the Wizard of Oz story. It's like, look, this character is this character, this character is this character, this character. You've just basically got to rescue Toto, or we'll call that Pogie, shall we? You've got to rescue and then get home. And the Wizard of Oz is our Theo, the Wizard Theodore from the Dizzy series. And it's like every character mapped.
Well, the funny thing is, it maps so well. We're thinking psychologically, deep down, it was one of the films that as kids we grew up with thinking that was really cool fantasy story. And you kind of wonder, but it never ever occurred to us. It's like, when we were working on Dizzy games, we'd never thought, let's do something like Wizard of Oz sort of thing. And yet it sort of it is.
And
Yeah.
and if you look at the sort of what it is and the challenges, it's like find this and take it to this person, find this and take it to this person, find this and take it to this person. Basically, go and do everybody else's jobs, quite frankly, and help everybody out. But that was also what was so funny about it, because one of the things we could do, and we did do in Wonderful Dizzy if you played it, we actually make jokes about the fact that you're doing everybody else's sort of dirty work, and we can kind of put a really good script in there. And actually, that's one of the things that we really went to town on, is having a really comical script in there, which we kind of figured was probably the most important thing, and the thing that could make it lift it above all the other Dizzy games. Because whilst you're telling a story, we used to tell it with minimal text, and you had to read a lot between the lines. So on this one, we basically went to town on the script and just said, let's tell the story properly and make all the funny gags and funny lines and everything, which we did, and we squeezed it all in.
Amazing.
Brilliant.
Go and play it. If you haven't played it, go play it. You play it just in the browser. I mean, if you go to wonderfuldizzy.com, play in the browser. It's just there.
Okay. I shall
that
be doing
easy.
that. Yeah.
It's not hard. It's like
I shall be doing that.
Brilliant. So,
how much will that cost you?
Turn my light on.
Ooh, wait a minute, nothing.
Beautiful.
So, what we've got next? I know I contacted yourself, Philip. I'm going to have to be very careful not to show the address on this, but I've got a couple of little items in here, and I emailed you, crikey, probably about 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And said, we've got this idea.
Felt like a month ago, but yeah, go on then.
Yeah. We've got this idea. Are you happy to do this? Bloody blah. That's fine. And you've we sent you a little gift which you signed. You've also gave us a free Sharpie, which is very nice.
Andrew, you put the pen in the envelope when you gave it back to me.
We've got a lovely free Sharpie. But we sent you this, and you very.
I just celebrated at the back after he said, "There you go, I've signed it," and he put the Sharpie back.
So I don't know if you can see that, but that's signed. So what we're going to do is we've done some sort of giveaway on our Facebook group. So if people want to join that and enter the competition, please do so. In due course, we're probably going to do something for charity as well. Maybe get some items and auction them off. But also, there's a couple of chaps. I've seen them in the chat. So Roger and Peter from the non-official fan, was it? I have written it down. Evercade fans group, non-official. So they're big fans of yours. So if you want to say hello to them, fantastic. But yeah, we're doing a little giveaway.
Yeah.
So they are big fans of yours.
Definitely. I personally believe that the Oliver Twins cartridge on the Evercade is the best cartridge. It's the one I played.
There's no doubt it is the best one. I must. My favourite game.
There you go.
My favourite one. Is it on? I'm sure it's on here.
I saw somebody do a review of all the games on the Evercade, and they actually downplayed Robin Hood. They go, "Yeah, it's all right, move on," kind of thing. And I'm like,
they've obviously
not played
you.
I know. It's like actually, Robin Hood is kind of a highlight. It's like I was a bit I was a bit annoyed at that review. I still did a retweet and everything because it was overall a positive review, but I was like, how could you not get Super Robin Hood? It was really cool.
It's a classic, isn't it? Let's face it, it's iconic. But I mean, my favourite game of yours is I like the BMX simulators. I loved playing them when I was a kid. Honestly,
the original is Richard Darling's game. I mean, so the founder of Codemasters with David. So he wrote the original Commodore 64 version, and then we converted it, but then we made the sequels. But yeah, they were cool. They did really well.
Brilliant.
And we actually turned it from BMXs into Grand Prix cars, so we made Grand Prix Simulator. And I got in trouble from Activision because they said it's like Super Sprint. It's like, well, it was bikes, and we thought the cars would be more trendy, so we just made the car version of BMX Simulator. Anyway, it was
happened to be similar to City Sprint at the same time, but, and much obviously ours was much better, which was their problem.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question about that.
I do think things like BMX Simulator, they dated a bit. They feel to me like they've dated. If you look at something like Dream World Pokey on the Evercade, it looks really, really nice. And you look at BMX Simulator and you go, in the 8-bit days, this was kind of good, having a rotate and top down and kind of races. But to me, that kind of gameplay dated.
I mean, it evolved into Micro Machines because effectively it turned into Micro Machines because they just made the screen start scrolling around the place, and that's where Micro Machines came from. So, which I think a lot of people liked.
People still rave about Micro Machines now. It has still got an incredibly dedicated fan base because it's a very good racing game. It's still good fun now, and I think that's why a lot of games, and some of the games that you've worked on and created, these games stand the test of time. I know people look at them and say, "Oh, maybe they're graphically not as good," but that.
That's all we can do. Let us laugh.
It's about the thing now, but a lot of.
The machines were so flipping limited. You were lucky you got what you got, quite frankly.
Yeah, but even now on modern systems, even on the PS5 and the new Xbox, people are still after that older feel. So the idea of people going back and making older style games with older style graphics, it just goes to show that playability is always number one in games, and these are the games that stand the test.
Gameplay is always number one. I would agree with that.
That is a problem, that you get these big teams making like huge numbers of artists, like making big levels. I mean, a little bit of a problem with Epic Mickey, frankly, is it's all production value, and at the end of the day, it's like, what's the gameplay? And because everything is taking like your gameplay, you might have 2 gameplay programmers, but you've got like 10 people on your character editor, like your character customizer, and 10 people on the sort of levels and maps and stuff. You got all these other people. The gameplay takes second place quite often, which is like, well, that's just dumb, because that is the game. The rest of it was supposed to be polished on top, not instead of. Whereas back in the day, it's like, look, the graphics are going to be a bit rubbish.
That's what we always
it's going to shine as if it plays well. So
that's what you always used to say about Signosis, wasn't it, Andrew? When Signosis started bringing out games,
the original Signosis games on the
they basically focused on art. They focused on art, not on gameplay. And we used to sort of criticise them back in the early days. It's like, what are they doing here? It's like, done it the wrong way round. They did all right from it, to be fair.
So the how did the actual Evercade cut? How did that come about?
They just reached out to me, said that they were going to be producing this console, and would we license some of our games to them? And I said, a little bit tricky because, and it's obviously the retro and 8-bit games, a little bit tricky because of our shared rights with Codemasters generally. I mean, yes, we did Ghostbusters 2, but don't even go there. It's like that's shared with whoever the Hollywood company is, and Dan Aykroyd and everybody else. And I said, don't even go there. It's like that's way too hard. But I said,
well, it was Columbia, which then got bought by Sony. But
Sony.
Nevertheless, too many people involved. Never going to happen. But I said, but I've got a pretty good relationship these days with Frank, the CEO of Codemasters. So I said, I'll just drop him an email, and I wrote to him, and he just said, "Is this one for charity, guys?" And so I said, "Yeah, it can be if you like. I mean, we're not ever expecting to make money off Izzy. I mean, that's just like, that happened back in the 80s. It's like, so I just wrote back going, it can be if you like. And he goes, yeah, as long as some decent money is given to charity, we're fine with it.
Brilliant.
So we don't make anything off this. And in fact, Evercade don't make anything off it. All royalties do go to charity.
Wow.
And
that's brilliant.
Just say that on the box, because I think it says that on the box. But all royalties go to charity.
That's fantastic.
But we didn't write games back in the 80s thinking, in 2021 we're going to have to pay the grocery bills with our royalties from this. No. We thought we'll be lucky if we can make some money over the next few months off this one, and then we'll move on to the next one. So.
Yeah, I know we've been asked, I think it might have been Roger or Peter, I can't remember which one, so apologies to those, but they said, is there any plans for a second cart at all?
We run out of games.
I have talked to them. No, that's not true, Andrew. That's NES only. Yes, I have been talking to them in the background. Maybe, yes, maybe. I have been talking to them, Andrew. You're not aware. Can I just say, we have had a lot of lockdown, and we've also been very busy. The first time we have met in over a year was about 3 weeks ago, and that's because he lives his life over there, and I live my life over here. We do kind of work together, but through Zoom and email and and everything else. And what we've been doing in the last year, we've been pretty flipping busy making something. And just before that, Andrew did most of the work, I feel, on making fast food on Switch, which I thought was pretty awesome. If you've played fast food on Switch, I did the maps. I put all the graphics together. But Andrew did all the code. Andrew did all the code. So, and I think that was the harder bit. So I can give him the credit for that. But yeah, and obviously that's free as well.
That's incredible.
I love free stuff. Free stuff is brilliant.
I have to say, we're going to have to educate people that that's not the way to be if you want to have the best creatives creating content in the future. And I say that line because I'm currently working on something, obviously. So,
exciting.
And I happened to put that kind of line into a PowerPoint I was doing earlier. So we need to educate people. You don't have to pay much because we're in a digital world. There's no content inventory. But 10, 20, 30p for a decent experience should be considered acceptable by the general public, and you will hear me saying that a lot more over the next 6 months.
But then the authors can spend a decent amount of time.
But then the creators, and by the way, that's not for us. That's not for us. That's for the creators who make stuff, because then they can actually focus more and do more good stuff. So if you enjoyed it, give them some money, and they'll do some more stuff. And if you don't give them any money, they won't.
That's why I think that
it works with channels like this.
Projects.
Yeah. Excellent. I think without going into some other really deeper territories with the other things. I mean, there's so many things we could talk to you about for absolutely hours on end. I think probably what we'll do is we'll probably have to leave it there for today. It's been absolutely incredible having you both on.
Amazing.
We're still a growing little community. We're very new to the certainly to the retro gaming community as a team, as people. We've been into it since birth, but as a little community ourselves, it's a real honor to have yourselves talk with us tonight.
Absolutely.
And it's like Ben said when we were sort of backstage waiting to come on, it's you just never expect to be able to chat to people like yourselves who have created games that have been huge parts of people's lives and huge parts of people's childhood. And childhood is something that everybody always holds dear to them. We just can't thank you enough for coming on, and thank you so much again for signing the cartridge for us to give away, which is amazing. It's fantastic.
Amazing.
Unless anybody else has anything else they want to ask you.
Everybody kind of enjoyed it. I'm glad you enjoyed our previous work, and hopefully you'll enjoy what we're currently working on. I mean, one of the things I would actually say is it's really weird whenever you're working on stuff, you're excited by it, you're spending all your work effort on it, and then when it's eventually seen, other people are talking about it. Hopefully, but you've almost moved on to the next thing by then.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, you're talking about that. It's like, that's last year.
Last year.
I always get excited by a new idea, and I'll just start something new.
Although, actually, the thing that we're working on should keep us busy for a few years, to be fair.
Brilliant. I'll look forward to that. Yeah. But before we go, there's what I like to do is sort of end on you as individuals and how you are, basically. So I don't mind. It's good to hear.
That's because I'm old.
But this sort of sums up your kindness, basically. But I have done some research, and I hope you don't mind sharing the story. But
I don't know what story it is.
In respect to Fruit Machine
Did anybody die? Oh no, I haven't managed to break that rule, have I?
No.
Keep going.
There was
Andrew
Fruit
almost
Machine.
killed somebody once, and I got blamed for it, which wasn't fair because I didn't even know what he was talking about.
I
But anyway,
don't-
that's
I
another
don't
fun story.
Maybe we'll do that next time.
Chat for it.
You threw somebody off a speedboat, Andrew.
Oh, whatever. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I like the whatever.
No.
But yeah, there
you
was
know that story.
Yes.
I took the blame for it.
They were fine. It was just I hit a rather bigger wave than I thought at a very high speed, and they just went flying. So I went around and picked them up again. It's fine.
Was it a bit mangled and
No,
a few broken bones?
they were fine. We were having a good laugh on a very fast boat. Anyway,
That sounds fine.
Should have held on more.
But yeah,
held on tighter.
So, Fruit Machine Simulator.
Mm.
I understand that you became involved in that, and I think you know where I'm going. So I think
I think we do.
I think if you don't want to share it, that's fine. Totally understand.
No, it's just a little bit of a sad story because the guy
I think
life and soul of the party, Jim Wilson. So he was best friends with Richard and David Darling. He was an artist. He was doing all the artwork for their Commodore 64 games. We'd just had some success with Super Robin Hood and Ghost Hunters.
He did some of the graphics in Ghost Hunters.
Did he do some of the graphics? Title screen,
I remember him doing the little organ and the clock and stuff. And then he did the title screen.
Well, he did he did the title screen of Grand Prix Simulator. And he was a really nice guy. I think he was 19, really energetic and lovely guy, fantastic guy.
Yeah.
And then we were just working on something, probably Dizzy or something, and we just got a phone call out of the blue, just saying Jim kind of we were for some graphics from him. He's died. I'm like, what? It was Christmas time. And he was out drinking. It was a place that has a pier on the south coast.
It's Lyme Regis. He died in Lyme Regis Pier, off the wall.
Basically, it was like 1 o'clock. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. A bunch of them had gone drinking, and he'd somehow fallen off. They were obviously playing Who Can Lean Over Furthest or something. I don't know. And somehow he'd fallen off. And drank. And it was really, really sad. We were just shocked. Somebody that we'd been talking to a couple of days before, and he was life and soul of the party, and everything lived for. So it's very sad.
Yeah,
very sad.
I think what happened, obviously horrendous, but I think your next actions, what you did to his family. I don't know if you want to go into that.
Well, he's just done the design for Fruit Machine Simulator. He basically designed the game himself, and he kind of, as a graphic artist, he'd completely designed this game. Mark Baldock, one of the guys programmers at Codemasters, was programming Spectrum version. He's the guy that just had finished Super Robin Hood. He finished Super Robin Hood. He then moved on and did Fruit Machine Simulator. And so we thought, well, this is never going to happen on the Amstrad, so we'll make it on the Amstrad, but we'll just give all the royalties to the family.
Yeah,
that's what we did.
And that's a lovely thing. Absolutely amazing.
I have to say, it didn't take that long. It was only a week. I mean, Fruit Machine is not that hard.
It was a few weeks. It was a few weeks, but yeah.
No, to donate the royalties is, unbelievable, amazing.
We've done it quite a few times, to be fair.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of our games where we just given it charity. We did the game for Bob Geldof. We did a game for Bob Geldof. And it's really annoying when you see reviews and they slag you off a bit. Like, it's like, look, we did it for we did it for charity.
I think doing Sport Aid as a kind of a twist on Dizzy was probably a little bit of a stretch too far. I'm not sure it's best game design in the world.
No.
I wasn't aware until you guys.
I have to say that the material you're working with, which is a bunch of people are all going to go running on like a half marathon, or they're going to walk a half marathon.
Yeah, make a game out of that.
Could you do the game of that? And it's like, well, it's a little bit of a tough challenge. It's really like, you do what you like, and it's like, yeah, right. I have to say, on reflection, what we actually should have done is just some really approachable puzzle game. I mean, something like a Candy Crush or something back in the day would have actually been better, because it just needed to be something kind of simple and really approachable that everybody could just pick up and play instantly. We found that out when we went on a TV show. So a Saturday morning TV show had us kind of launch the game on air. Maidstone, Kent. I remember going down to Maidstone, Kent, in a big boot store. They set it all up. They had hundreds of school kids in, and we were announcing the game. And then, of course, when they actually had to play the game, it was like, doesn't really work on TV very well.
It's just a
game.
slow
Who's got the
adventure.
highest score? And it's like, well, it's not really about score. It's kind of about exploration. It's like, oh, I can see Mount Rushmore over here. And it's like, yeah, kind of focus on kind of some nice visuals. Well, nice if you consider Spectrum Mount Rushmore nice. It's like, that's bloody iffy as well. So I think we kind of, it was a bit of a tough stretch, that one. But hey ho, still did it.
I didn't know that you guys had done this new Dizzy cart for Evercade, giving all the proceeds to charity. That's brilliant. You're doing that. I wasn't aware that was the case, but no, it's fantastic that you guys are doing that and giving back.
Yeah. Does it not say on the case somewhere? Yeah.
It probably does.
I can't tell. I know it's
fantastic.
But I'll be honest, I can't actually see it now. I'm looking, but I do. Oh well, yeah. I'm not sure.
It goes to the National Video Game Museum, which is now in Sheffield, and to Special Effects, which make games accessible for disabled kids.
I'll tell you what, I can't actually see
the two charities that it goes to, which are very, very good charities.
I've got old eyes. I can't actually read the small font. It might say here, but I can't read it. And if they did, they put it in such small font that you can't read it. They're not thinking about people like me. Right?
Yeah, it's quite. I think it might be on when you order it. It might be on Funstock. It's got a little line there about.
Yeah.
I have seen it somewhere. Yeah, somewhere.
So just before we.
And by the way, thank you to Evercade as well, because they donated all of their proceeds as well. They actually make absolutely nothing. Evercade from that cartridge, which they say is a shame because it's one of the best sellers. But but hopefully it sold them some of these.
Yes,
and I do
definitely.
So I do think that. So I think it's all worked out well.
Brilliant,
fantastic.
Yeah.
So just before we go, is there a website you guys can plug where all the new information of things you're working on, projects that are coming out, that kind of thing you want to stick up?
Well, anybody can, and everybody, if you're a fan of our kind of retro stuff, should go to allthetwins.com. Clearly, the clues in the title. And that basically has a lot of our games playable and videos and downloads and loads of games in the browser and all that kind of. They usually link through to Yokefolk to play in the browser, partly because he does a lot of the work behind the scenes of actually making that stuff work. So well done to Andrew Joseph and the team at Yokefolk. We obviously do all the Blitz stuff. I think the website's still live, or is it not, Andrew?
No, it's not live at the moment. It's on my plate to do. I've become a website designer, it seems. You can't ask other people to do things like that. So,
well, for a long time, we kept all the games and we kept everything there on Blitz Games, so people can go back and look at it.
I will build it at some point. The Blitz Games website will come back at some point. We'll have to go into another lockdown or something when we're not busy.
It'll probably get extended. It's going to get extended. So
I was going to say the Fuse on the Switch. If you haven't seen Fuse on the Switch, get it. It's not that expensive. You do have to purchase it. It's like a tenner or something, but it's a full programming system with loads of sort of games in, and that's where we wrote Fast Food Dizzy. And if you look at Fast Food Dizzy, it's such a powerful system for Fuse, and it kind of means that anybody can just make games on a Switch. I mean, it is quite incredible that you can just do that, and they share it with friends. So yeah, big plug for Fuse on the Switch. It's awesome. It will be coming to other platforms soon. And obviously what we're working on now is still a bit massive secret. All I can say is the company is called Panovox, Panovox, Panovox. What we're working on, though, is a massive secret, which will be revealed, all being well, in August. But people can sign up right now to be notified early, and they can sign up to become early testers.
Brilliant.
Of it as well.
Cool.
Yeah, sign up for that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, maybe nearer the time, we could maybe convince you to come back to our very small slice of retro gaming to talk about that, because I'm just absolutely intrigued even more with the back catalogue that you guys have worked on. So if at some point in the future you would be happy to come back, we'd love to have you back on to maybe talk about this new project that you're working on.
Definitely. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
All happy.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for who's tuning in, putting in comments and questions. Like I say, if you want to win the cartridge, head on over to our Facebook group over at Retro Gaming Revival, and have a wonderful, wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you very much.
Good
Okay.
night, everyone. Take
Yeah,
care.
thank you very
Bye.
much.
Stay safe.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.